Welcome to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast, bringing you the latest in sports news, fantasy analysis, and opinions. Don't forget the hot takes. Can't have a sports show without hot takes these days. What about hot cakes, though? I want some hot cakes. Now here's your host, ready to jump into the thick of things, Dwayne Callender.
Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. Gotta be talking about the players that I am saying stay far, far away from. You know, I honestly thought that Antonio Brown was going to be on this list. I ended up having to put him in my value list because when I started taking a look at some of the players in the rankings for this upcoming year, I realized I hated a ton of players. This should be an interesting year. I think there are a lot of bust potential players in the draft this year. But you know what? Let's dive into it because we're gonna get into the nitty gritty. So first up, one of the biggest worries that I have in fantasy this year is Michael Thomas, who was the most consistent player in fantasy the last 2 years. Here's my bugaboo with Michael Thomas, and no one is talking about this. Drew Brees in the second half of the season regressed so mightily as a passer that it was the Michael Thomas show that was bailing out Brees. But as the arm strength of Brees was deteriorating in the second half of the year, it was getting harder and harder for Michael Thomas to make the same plays he was in the first half of the year. That's why when you saw in the NFC Championship game, as much as we complain about how blatant the missed pass interference call was, the reason why the Saints lost that game was Drew Brees couldn't find ways of getting the ball to anyone else, including Michael Thomas, because, you know, the Rams were doing a very good job of blanketing Michael Thomas. Brees couldn't pinpoint the ball, and he was having trouble getting the ball out to some of the other wide receivers. Now, you could say Brees might have been banged up and wearing down towards the end of the year, but I don't know. It's when you still have some of these other wide receiver targets like Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio, it's a little bit hard paying up the premium because I'm seeing Michael Thomas being ranked on some boards as the number one wide receiver. I don't know about that. Am I going to pass up on Michael Thomas in the second round? No. But if you're telling me that Michael Thomas is a lock in the first round, I'm going to dispute that. You got Odell available. You got even if you're going to reach for Mike Evans, I just think that there's a worry here with Michael Thomas, especially in standard leagues where you're not getting points per reception. I think there's a very real concern with Drew Brees' regression potential this year because, again, Drew Brees is up there in age. He's 39. You know, it's not a spring chicken. There's a real chance that the Saints offense regresses in terms of passing efficiency and that it becomes a lot more run-based. And believe me, I didn't really get to talk about him enough in some of my other podcasts, but Latavius Murray, I believe, is an upgrade over Mark Ingram. And, being able to have I think a faster back to hit the hole than Mark Ingram, I think brings more dynamic run game to the Saints offense. Yes, should that help with play action with Brees? Yeah, but play action is not necessarily the forte of Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is more going across the middle of the field and getting catches in traffic over defenders. And again, I have some concerns with Drew Brees' passing. I'm just saying. Not saying not to pick him at all, but I would say be wary of value not being returned. Another player, Todd Gurley, still going way too early in drafts. I'm seeing it. I'm still seeing people taking Todd Gurley in the first round. The Rams have outlined their game plan this year. Keep Todd Gurley as healthy as possible for the playoffs. They want to limit his position by at least 30 to 35%. So that means Todd Gurley's only going to be playing about 60% of snaps instead of the 85 to 90% he was last year, because they're worried about his arthritic knee. And as someone with arthritic knees, I can tell you, arthritic knees don't necessarily get better. It's a long and difficult process. So, maybe I'm a little bit biased from personal experience, but it doesn't really play out all too well unless you go more extreme routes in terms of medical procedures when you have genuine arthritis in the knee. There's no magic cure-all bullet to address that, especially in a position as difficult as NFL running back. So, again, Todd Gurley being taken way too early in drafts. When he's being taken in the back end of the first round, I shake my head because I've seen enough draft results to tell me that people are not taking the Rams at their word. They're thinking that the Rams are going to back off of this. The Rams' goal is to win the Super Bowl. So, obviously most teams, the goal is to win the Super Bowl, but the Rams legitimately believe that they're going to win the Super Bowl. They're going to do everything possible to keep Todd Gurley healthy, and they're going to use everyone else on the offense to that extent to keep Todd Gurley fresh. So, Todd Gurley, as you knew him, is not going to be the same regular season Todd Gurley. And if you've been paying attention, Todd Gurley does not give a damn about fantasy football, fantasy owners. He even trolls fantasy owners about when they complain about him taking himself out of the game right before the Rams are about to score a touchdown. He doesn't care. So I don't think Todd Gurley is going to be even remotely concerned about the possibility of being taken out of the game as the Rams are in goal line situations, because I think that's a very real possibility. Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown are in there for the specific purpose of taking the goal line carry so that Todd Gurley doesn't take those blows. That, to me, signals you have a very real possibility that Todd Gurley does not hit double-digit touchdowns this year. No way does that make him even a running back one option, in my opinion. I think he's running back two this year. That means Todd Gurley should not be taken until the back end of the second round, if not round 3. He's going in the back end of the first round, early second round. Sorry. I don't see how the value gets returned there. I think the Rams have been more than upfront about how they want to handle Todd Gurley this year. People are just not reading the headwinds. Another guy to be wary of, Adam Thielen. And here's the thing with Thielen. It's not that I dislike Thielen. It's the fact that I think people are sleeping on Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, in the second half of the year, once the Vikings shifted more to a running-based offense, the passing lanes opened up more for Stephon Diggs going across the middle of the field. They weren't nearly as focused on going down the field with bombs to Thielen. So Thielen's production dropped off precipitously. So to me, yes, I get it why you're taking Adam Thielen in the second round. I just think that from a valuation standpoint, there are other wide receivers in the second round you should be targeting. So if you take Adam Thielen in the third round, that's proper valuation. But if you're going earlier than that, I don't know if you're going to get that value. It's just the way it is. Moving on, we got Damian Williams. And this is the running back that honestly is going to get outscored by a ton of wide receivers. I think this is the running back one with the only other running back I think has more volatility than Damian Williams, to be honest, are Leonard Fournette and Derrick Henry. And I hate all three of them. So let's tackle Damian Williams first. The Chiefs' offense is dynamic enough that they don't really need anyone to be the lead running back. So when the Chiefs signed Carlos Hyde, I looked at that and said, that's going to be a timeshare. I don't think Damian Williams has necessarily the talent level to prove that he's going to be the primary running back for the Chiefs this year. I think it's going to be a strict timeshare with Carlos Hyde, and whoever gets the most amount of production is going to be the back that gets the true touches. I don't really see this being advancing any more to a 70-30 split. I think that's the best case scenario. More likely, you're probably going to see 60-40. And if it's 60-40, that's running back too. Like, the only guy who can be efficient enough offensively to survive a 70-30 split is Alvin Kamara. Damian Williams does not get that benefit of the doubt. So, don't like Damian Williams from that respect. Then, when we're talking about Leonard Fournette, I hate Leonard Fournette because of the fact that Leonard Fournette had enough issues in that Jags locker room and with the front office that I could easily see the Jags just saying, you know what, he's been more trouble than he's worth. Let's bench this guy and see if we can trade him mid-year or cut him. I could easily see the Jags moving on from Leonard Fournette and disciplining him by week 6. That's way too much risk to be taking on when I'm using a pick in the first 3 to 4 rounds on a running back. I have no confidence in Leonard Fournette not getting in trouble with the Jags. And to me, I'd almost rather spend the draft pick on Melvin Gordon. And I hate Melvin Gordon. It's like, for the reasons I've talked about in the past, Melvin Gordon's always at risk of getting hurt. So it's just not worth the valuation on some of these running backs like Melvin Gordon, Derrick Henry, injury prone and very volatile in terms of production. There are a ton of running backs I do not like this year. And, they're going to be taken because people are going to look at positional need. But to me, if you can't get those running backs in the first couple of rounds, guess what? Start punting down and start getting creative with bringing in the likes of a Duke Johnson in the middle rounds, Philip Lindsay. Those are the guys that I would start taking a closer look at. But, there are too many guys that I think are busts in the running back range this year. Tariq Cohen, I'm going to end up drafting Tariq Cohen, but I have no illusions that he's going to be a great value. David Montgomery, also running back on the Bears. Between Cohen and Montgomery, one of them's going to be a bust. I don't know which one, but one of them's going to be a bust because Matt Nagy has his designs on how he wants to run his offense, and usually it's spreading the ball around so that more often than not, everybody doesn't get fed. And, that's just the way it is. When you're trying to devise a draft strategy, you're trying to find guys who are consistently going to get volume throughout the season. And there are enough running backs this year that I have no idea where they're going to be 1 week to the next. And James White is another example on the Patriots. I love James White. I don't love his valuation. If you're taking James White in the first 60 picks of a fantasy draft, you're asking for trouble. Because, again, the Pats spread the ball around enough, and unless you're Sony Michel, none of those other players are going to get enough of those breakdowns in terms of evaluation to be consistent enough. So I look at this as a case where at the end of the day, we have to be more balanced in terms of how we evaluate targets throughout the year. And I don't think the industry does nearly an appropriate amount of times. They always look at the upside. They don't look at the potential downside in terms of attempts that guys could be facing. And the truth of the matter is, there was a lot more risk in the running back position this year than there have been in years past. Timeshares are a very legitimate thing moving on there. And, it's very likely that a number of these running backs are going to bust in a horrible way. And, they're being drafted as if there's no bust potential. And there very much is. All right. Moving on. I've talked about quarterback a couple of times, but I'm going to say it again. Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, all these quarterbacks that are going in the 3rd and 4th rounds, just stop. I've seen even Baker Mayfield pegged it in the 4th round, and just stop. Just stop, folks. Quarterbacks should not be drafted before round 8. Unless it's Patrick Mahomes, and even Mahomes, I only have on maybe you can justify it in a 12-team league if he's just after round 4 and you go into round 5. The values that you get for quarterbacks are not significant enough to distance themselves away from other skill position players. So, it's just not there. The value is not there for the vast majority of these players. It's just not. So that's why, I say this again. Wait on the quarterbacks. Wait on the tight ends. Because, again, outside of the top 2, it's a hodgepodge of same valuations, but very different average draft projections. And the later you can go with that, the better off you'll be, because you'll have more skilled position players that can make a difference for your rosters. All right, so one other guy that I'm going to throw out there, well, 2 guys. One being Josh Gordon, still being taken way too early. I know what Josh Gordon's talent level is. I know the New England Patriots are not going to make the same mistake this year again that they did last year with giving Josh Gordon open arms, being involved in the offense, knowing that Josh Gordon, has a very legitimate substance abuse problem. Yes, they will have Josh Gordon in the mix at some point in the year. I don't think they're going to rush things either. I think they could put him on the PUP list while they sort through if he can consistently be clean and sober and have him available for the stretch run. I don't think they're going to risk putting him on to start the year too early, because they saw how that played out last year by rushing him through things. I think Josh Gordon's just one of those guys that you got to treat him with kid gloves and just wrap him in bubble wrap if possible, just because of how powerful substance addiction can be. I just don't think they're going to rush him into the mix. But the fact that he's still being drafted in the first 5 rounds of fantasy drafts, I just think it's a waste of a pick. I really do, folks. That's just the way I look at it. The other guy who's being drafted way too early, Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt suspended for the first 10 weeks of the season. You have no idea how your team is going to be performing. I said first 10 weeks. Basically, he's suspended the first 8 game. He's suspended the first 8 games of the year. So let me phrase that. So when I say the first 10 weeks of the year, he's suspended the first 8 games of the season. The Browns have a bye in week 7. That doesn't count in terms of the suspension. So you add on another week. So the earliest that you'll know how he's practicing and being used with the team and being able to be used is week 10. Other than that, you're guessing. So you're waiting 10. So you got to get through 9 weeks of the season with no injuries, no disruption, no underperforming players, with a player who's not going to be on your, not going to be able to be used on your roster. And you can't put him on the IL list either, like an injury list. He's suspended, not injured. So that's a lot to ask. You're playing with fire when you're drafting a guy like Kareem Hunt. No pun intended, given all the firestorm and everything else that was going on with him that led to that suspension in the first place. I just don't think. I don't think it's a good idea. Another guy that, again, people are drafting way too early, Darius Geis of the Redskins. He tore his ACL, still hasn't been cleared yet to practice. And he had to have 3 surgeries on that ACL. Usually it takes a while to recover from ACL. It usually takes a full year. And then some. It ends up being more like a year and a half getting back up to speed. The Redskins still have Adrian Peterson in the backfield and Chris Thompson as the pass catching back. So I don't see a whole lot of value being added to Geis, and Geis is being drafted in the 6th and 7th round. Again, these are guys that, I think still being way too optimistic in terms of draft status. So, I'll leave it there, but, it is what it is. Too many times, again, as I said, it's folks trying to draft off a potential upside without taking any consideration as to what the downside is going to be in drafts. Now, on the side of potential sleepers to keep in mind, here are a couple of guys that I think you should be paying attention to. James Washington of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's going to be the number 2 for the Steelers this year. Whether he can actually bring that value is another question. But I think that, I've seen James Washington almost go the entire draft without being picked. He's being picked after round 11 in most drafts. And I think in PPR formats, yeah, he should be drafted a lot earlier. Half PPR, yeah, you can wait until round 11. But in full point PPR, should be going earlier. Steelers offense is still too good from a scheme standpoint. If he even comes close to the talent level that he has, he's going to put up decent numbers. And, Dante Moncrief was signed in the offseason to be the number 2. But as Moncrief has shown over the years, he is more than likely to get hurt before week 6. So I think Washington is there from a production standpoint and someone to keep an eye out for. Another guy to take a look at is Devin Singletary, the running back of the Buffalo Bills. LaShawn McCoy is either set to be cut or traded by the Bills at some point this year. It'll most likely be a trade, but, sooner or later, it's going to be Devin Singletary's backfield. It's just a matter of what the time is going to be. On the back end of drafts, I like Devin Singletary. Another running back would be Justice Hill of the Baltimore Ravens. Mark Ingram, as I said, he's not really that good. It's like, I'll be honest. And in each of the past 3 seasons, the lead running back for the Ravens at the start of the season lost their job before the end of the season. Mark Ingram's not going to miss contact. He's, it's a very tough division. I think Ingram's more likely to get banged up throughout the course of the year. I think Justice Hill is a perfect stash play, waiting for Mark Ingram to fail. So I like Justice Hill quite a bit, along with Singletary. Justice Hill, to me, projects very similarly to Philip Lindsay, who did great work for the Broncos last year. Again, I think you can see a difference between how Hill runs with the football and Ingram runs with the football. And if Baltimore gets off to a slow start this year, I think it'll be a lot more clamoring for Justice Hill to get more carries throughout the course of the year. And worst case scenario, I think with his pass catching abilities, he'll be able to forge a little Tariq Cohen type of role for the Ravens to start the year, just so he gets onto the field. So I think those are potential sleeper candidates to keep an eye out for. Now, another guy, and I can't believe I'm calling him a sleeper, but you know what? He's fallen so far off the depth charts that when I say punt the tight end position, I say it for this reason. Jimmy Graham is being taken after round 11 in most fantasy drafts. Jimmy Graham has the athleticism to pay dividends. So why am I reaching for Hunter Henry in round 6 when I can get someone just as athletic as Hunter Henry in round 11 and 12 with Jimmy Graham? With a better quarterback, by the way. I don't understand how the tight ends are being ranked this year. I think too many people are being way too optimistic about some of the tight end production this year when you got guys like Olsen and Jimmy Graham being that much later in terms of average draft position. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, I'm going to call Jimmy Graham a sleeper this year. Sue me. But that's the way I'm looking at it in terms of the sleepers. But, in terms of the bust potential, there are a lot of players to be wary of this year. So just because of the average draft position, don't be fooled by average draft position. Think about the reality situation of some of these teams that you're drafting for, and think about the realistic possibility of, can this guy return the value that's being talked about here? I think in a lot of cases, if you take that second guess of questioning the draft value, you might actually realize, it is a lot of hype that's being surrounded on certain players that I just don't think can be met. Well, that's going to do it for the show. I'll get into more of my detailed rankings as we get closer to Labor Day. But that's going to be all for now. But have a good one, folks.